Wait, give me just a second here and we'll get started. I
Okay.
just walked in the door.
Sorry about that. No,
No,
we ran late with Public Works, so.
no worries.
Where is David? And post. Yes.
All right, I think we're good to go. It's 7:32. I am going to mute everyone and call this meeting, the Yardley Borough Council, to order. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sorry, I was muted there. First on our agenda this evening is our roll call.
Okay, Mr. Brea,
Present.
Ms. Thompson, Mr. Finer,
Present.
Ms. Siegel Morris,
Present.
Mr. McCann,
Here.
Mr. Ross,
Here.
Mr. Curtin.
Present.
All right, with 6 members present, we have a quorum. We're also joined by Mayor Harding this evening. Moving on, we will go to community announcements. If at this time any member of council has something they would like to announce for the good of the community, this is the opportunity to do so. Going once.
David, I have one.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to keep mentioning fundraising efforts for the Mary Yardley Bridge. You can go to fodc.org and there's a tab there to donate to the Mary Yardley Bridge project. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements this evening? Going once, going twice. Hearing none, we will move on to public comment. This is the portion of the meeting during which members of the public may address council regarding items that do not appear on the agenda. If you would like to address council regarding an item that does appear on the agenda, you will be given an opportunity to do so during council's deliberation of that particular business item. Council members, or excuse me, members of the public are asked to please state their name and address for the record before their comment. And in our Zoom setting, again, under the participants tab, you should be able to use the raise hand function if you wish to be acknowledged. If you are calling in, I believe that is done by pressing *9. And of course, if you really can't figure it out, you can just wave at us and we will most likely see you and acknowledge you for comment. Do we have any public comment this evening? Right, I see Dr. Perlmutter.
Hi, Dawn Perlmutter, 18 West College Avenue. I'm just following up. I was in the Public Works meeting and we ran out of time, but there was a discussion about North Main Street and how the curb wasn't completely, one of the persons in there thought it
Whiskey section.
Correct.
they thought it was a safety issue. And I guess the suggestion was to have Ken go out, but maybe you might need the engineers to go out and look at it. Just a suggestion. It sounded pretty bad.
Well, we did talk about it in the meeting. We are having Ken go out to take a look at the stone and sweep that up, and then the next chance we get, Liz and I are gonna walk it and look it all over.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm just saying this for my whole neighborhood.
No problem.
All right, so thank you, Dr. Perlmutter. Does that conclude your public comment?
Yes, it does.
Right, thank you. Do we have any other public comment this evening? Going once, going twice. All right, hearing and seeing none, we will move on then to the consideration of the consent agenda dated for today, September 15th. The items included in the consent agenda are approval of the minutes from the last meeting, the bills list dated for today, a certificate of appropriateness 20-18, an event permit for school portraits in Buttonwood Park, and another event permit for music classes in the park for September and October. Would any member of council ask for one of these items to be considered separately? All right, hearing no request, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda dated today, September 15th?
So moved.
Second.
All right, the motion was made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Mr. Ross. Are there any questions or discussion from council? All right, and Dr. Perlmutter, I see you. I'll unmute you for comment.
Thanks. I brought this up before. It was the event permit for the music classes. I had mentioned that this is a for-profit business from New Jersey that is charging people to go there. I have no problem with the borough renting out the gazebo. A lot of towns do that. But I was just wondering again about the insurance and the responsibility, since there's a lot of families and kids that go to this, and what our policy is going to be. Are we going to allow Yardley Borough businesses to use the park in this manner instead of, actually running a business out of it? Again, no problem with it. It's kind of a nice event, but it is a for-profit business, and I don't know if you have a contract with them or it's just the insurance might be problematic.
Mr. Bree, if I may answer, they do provide insurance, as with every other event permit that comes in.
Great, thank you. And I know that Manager Johnson and I also briefly discussed this, that, one of the things that we will be looking at as we get into budget season and with adoption of the budget will also be our annual fee schedule. So this will be one of the things that we'll reevaluate is what are we, charging for not just this space, for any other rental space in the borough. These are revenue opportunities, particularly at a time when, we're aware of the economic situation that, I think that we want to make sure that if there are revenue opportunities out there for the borough, that we're not passing them up. So we will be considering that as a part of our larger budget discussion.
Thank you.
Any other comments regarding consent agenda? All right, hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries 6-0. Next item, I'll recognize Chief Kelly for a report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight I have two items. Earlier this evening, we had our well-postponed 2020 awards ceremony. The department gave awards, 3 Excellent Police Service Awards, 2 Unit Citation Awards, 2 Life-Saving Awards, and our annual GEM Award out at that meeting. So congratulations to those officers. The second item I have is filling a vacancy in the police department. We have 14 officers allotted, and we only have 13 on the books due to a resignation for a full-time position. And we reviewed the applicants. We found the most qualified candidates. We identified candidate Joseph Dragon, who has approximately 20 years police experience, much of it in Bucks County. He's an accident reconstructionist, a former field training officer, and a rage instructor. So he brings with him a host of qualifications already, which is going to make him easy to train. He was interviewed by the borough manager and myself, and then later by the Public Safety Committee, and everybody unanimously agrees that we should hire Officer Joseph Dragon. So I would ask at some point this evening that we make a motion to hire that officer. That concludes my report, sir.
We hear a motion to that effect.
Yes, I move that Yardley Borough extend a conditional offer to hire Joseph Dragon as a part-time police officer pending certification from the Pennsylvania Municipal Police Officers Education and Training Commission.
Second.
All right, the motion was made by Ms. Siegel Morris, seconded by Mr. Ross. Is there any discussion from council on this item? I see Mayor Harding.
Hey, Chief, real quick, could you just, for the record and for some of the newer council members, just disclose kind of the non-cost due to his being part-time? Just talk real quickly about that.
Sure, and I believe the candidate's also on the Zoom call. So his part-time, we only pay the hours in which the officer works. And the savings, normally it will take us between 100 and 200 hours to field train an officer who does not have experience. We expect Officer Dragon to field train in about a quarter of that. So there's a significant savings in labor by hiring someone like this with a vast amount of experience.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions from council? Any comments from the public? Hearing none, I will call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Are there any abstentions? All right, hearing none, the motion carries 6-0.
And sir, before we move on, normally this is where we would swear the officer in, but we will make a time and an appointment with the mayor, and we'll take care of that at some later date.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And before we move on, I just want to take a quick moment as well to, recognize not only the officers who got some awards earlier this evening, and I apologize, I wasn't able to be part of that, but just our entire police force in Yardley Borough. I know that nothing about 2020 has been an easy year. And I've said it before and I will say it again, I feel tremendously lucky that of the many, many things we worry about here on council, the ability of our police department to do their job and do it well is not one of those concerns. So to Chief and to all of the department, please extend just our gratitude for everything that they do for us.
Thank you, sir. I'll pass that on to the officers.
Thank you.
If I may chime in, I'd also like to, just having been at the award ceremony earlier, to extend my gratitude and appreciation to the chief and the department. And also just to say that when you hear some of the stories, the lives saved, the actual things that were done, I mean, you hope that you never need the help of the department. And so you might not, it's kind of invisible to people what they do, but there are people living in this borough who wouldn't be living here if it wasn't for some of the acts of the officers in the department. So I just want to make sure that we all recognize that, especially during such a difficult time for police officers to do their jobs.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll move on for our engineers report.
All righty. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So with regards to general updates, other than what was previously provided in my engineers report, the only new item that I have was that I spoke with a resident at 8 Ring Van Horn, who has a concern about increased amount of runoff landing behind his property after the ML7 expansion. So We are going to be scheduling an inspection to check it out and see what's going on. He had a few trees fall during the last storm event and is concerned that potentially others may fall due to the increased amount of runoff landing in the creek behind. So we're just going to do an investigation, see what's going on. It's very likely that the removal of the tree that has fallen will be his responsibility because I don't think it's in navigable water. But we're going to help advise the best course of action so that even if he is responsible for it, he's going to do what's going to be the best for long run for himself and general safety. So that's it. That's the only other thing that I have to add to general updates. Everything else is as written. So if there's no other questions about anything listed in general updates, I have 2 motions that need to be made today. The first one is resolution number 2009. That is to be for the MTF grant. That is to be submitted at the end of the month for the North Main Sidewalk Phase 2 project. And does that need to include the amount that the resolution is for? Matt, can you make the motion?
I can make the motion, but it does have to include the amount.
Okay. Do you know it or do you need me to get it for you?
Oh, I do not know it. I looked at it last week, but yeah, there's no way I remember that.
That's fine. It's 4,000 something. Let's see if I can find it. Let's see here. There it is. Okay, it's for $405,791.50.
Okay, 405.
791.50.
Okay.
And that is for the Multimodal Transportation Fund from the Commonwealth Financing Authority.
Okay. All right, so I move that we approve 20-09 to the Moto Transportation Fund, the amount of $405,000, $791.50. Yeah.
We have a second.
Second.
All right, that motion was made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Mr. McCann for resolution 20-09. Are there any questions or comments from council? Are there any questions or comments from the public? All right, hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0.
Wonderful. Okay, and then the next item that we need a motion for is to approve the change of scope for the Main and Afton intersection. This was provided at the last meeting. However, there was a request to see the change of scope tasks broken out individually instead of a lump sum. So we updated the change of scope that was sent along with the report. If there's any questions, ask them now. Otherwise, would request that you make a motion to approve the change of scope.
Thank you for providing that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is there a motion?
I'll move that we approve the change of scope for the North Main Signal Project.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Mr. Ross, seconded by Mr. McCann for the change of scope for the Main and Afton project. Are there any questions or comments from council?
I think it's the Main and Afton signal project, right? Just for clarification, not the
Yes,
North Main
correct.
signal.
It is the Main and Afton.
All right, any questions, comments from the public? All right, hearing and seeing none, we will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0.
Okay, and then on to project updates. So I'll start off with Main and Afton. So I did speak with PennDOT about whether or not we are still ADA compliant. They had somebody go out there and they acknowledged that there is less than a 4-foot clearance on one area, but that it's not significant and that typically it would require a TIF, which I was not familiar with, but apparently that's something that you fill out to show that PennDOT's aware of that and that's what's there. And they assured me that there are areas that are worse. And my response was, that's fine that there are areas that are worse, but we have people who are concerned about this. So if there's anything we can do to address this, I would like to know. So they're going to send out somebody specific from their ADA department to do an inspection and kind of give us the options of what can be done. So as soon as I know that that's been scheduled, I'll let you guys know, but continuing to try and make sure that we're following through on that and that issue. And then additionally, I did check with the traffic engineer to be clear on what exactly was supposed to happen with the pedestrian signaling, because at the last meeting there was concern that it hadn't actually been turned on. And so I just want to clear up what was actually permitted to make sure that there's not a misunderstanding and that people aren't expecting something else. So the Main and Afton intersection does not receive enough pedestrian traffic to have an all red phase ever. That was not something that was ever in the ballpark for us. However, having an advanced pedestrian phase was allowed when pedestrians are crossing Main Street. So when somebody was crossing Main Street, hits the pedestrian button, they will then cycle in an advanced pedestrian phase where pedestrians will have about 3 to 5 seconds ahead of when the light turns green to lay claim to the walk and have the right of way. When it comes to crossing Afton, because of the left turn signal, it was not feasible to have that kind of a pedestrian advanced phasing. So pedestrians will be allowed to walk after the left signal has completed its phasing. So when it becomes green for everybody, that's when you are allowed to cross Afton. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Was there something at one point that we discussed where we would have to ask for permission to allow crossing of Afton under the advanced pedestrian phase as well? Maybe not that left, but the other side where they don't have the left signal. Or, I mean, is it just not? In other words, why can't the left signal just wait until, or after the left signal is on, before the light turns green? There's a space of time. Why wouldn't the advanced pedestrian phase happen then?
So based off of what Derek told me earlier today, that would require it to be red everywhere, and that was not something that PennDOT was willing to give to that intersection. I'm not entirely sure why that is the case. I just know that that was what was said. The only other thing that we could potentially do to increase the safety would be to have additional warning signs ahead of the intersection. That's something that we are allowed to do. I don't know if that's something we would like to pursue, but we can. But in Public Works, I went through this explanation with Matt Ross, and he confirmed that what I described is what is going on out there, which means when I checked in with the contractor a couple weeks ago and he said that they had done it, then they had indeed. So what is there is what is supposed to be there.
Yeah, I get that, having tested it out. I mean, there is that, you know, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't fully resolve my concern, which is because there is a lot of traffic that turns off of Main, and because of the angle of the intersection, there's still that potential of pedestrian vehicular conflict happening. So especially on the Starbucks side.
Right.
That's the worst one of the 4, I think. Well, that one and between the bank and the jewelry, those 2. But in any case, you know, I guess if there's nothing that can be done, then we have to focus on other. You're essentially saying there's nothing that can be done, because without having it be all red, it's the only option, and that they would never agree to that, even if we asked them for that.
We did ask for it, and they said
right.
no.
But I thought they said no unless I thought there was something, I thought there was something else. I guess there wasn't. I thought I remember no, like the initial thing is no, but there was a way to get an exception or something.
There, the initial conversation was that that's not typical at the kind of intersection that we have for the level of traffic, but that we could most likely get the advanced PED phase for the one
Okay.
direction. And so we did, we pursued that, that was
Right.
approved.
All right, thanks.
There's a comment that popped up.
Oh, yep, I saw that. Go ahead.
Would they have an option to do alternate switching? Can you expand on what you mean by that, Mr. Morris? Do alternate?
At the intersection where the light changes, have the turn lanes, have them allow them to make turns, and then the east, I guess from the river up, would have a green, and then people could go across at the same time that the other options is stopped. So you would have it, you know, east-west would go one way and north-south would alternate at a different time to allow crossing at the same time.
I think that's kind of how it works.
No, so coming up from the river gets a green, they all flow. Then the opposite side going towards the river gets a green afterwards, as opposed to at the same time. Because then you could have people cross, alternate switching.
Okay. I mean, at this point in time, changing up the signal phasing like that would be a lot of extra money to go back through all of that. Whether or not that's something you guys want to pursue in the future, that potentially, we can certainly ask Derek about that a little bit more. But at this point, with the contract that we currently have with the contractor, that's not something that we could pursue.
Well, isn't that just a matter of I'm just trying to understand. I thought the system we put in is quite flexible in terms of programming. I mean, say you know, we checked that out and PennDOT said, oh yeah, that we could do that because it's not all red. It's green one way, red the other, then green one way, red. You know, it's, and if they didn't have a problem with that, I thought the whole idea was that this system was relatively easy to just, you know, put in the codes.
It is, but you still have to update your permit plan with PennDOT that they have on their records. So it's that whole process of reopening the permit. So when we were just adding a pedestrian phase, that wasn't a whole lot of work on Derek's part. It was about like 2 days worth of work. Reconfiguring the entire intersection, that has a little bit more involved in it.
But what's reconfiguring? Is just
Reconfiguring the phasing. So if you're going to change up when things are red and when things are green, you have to re-input the traffic flow and check the incoming roads that change how things work. Like, it's not as easy to just be like, oh, well, let's do it this way, because it impacts traffic in and outside of the borough. So you have to take those into account when you do anything like that. And so if you have an intersection that is used to functioning how it is right now with surrounding intersections, it could absolutely impact what's going on around them. So you would have to ensure that it's not going to end up causing a backup in other places that's going to make things even more dangerous for another intersection. No intersection is all by itself. So you can't just randomly do something like that, even though technologically with the cabinet and what's there, it would be very easy to physically reprogram it. It's a matter of the permitting side of it and the approval by PennDOT.
And that kind of system where you alternate, is there a name for that? Is that something that makes it safer?
Well, it depends. So there are some intersections that utilize this idea of green time. So like they use this out in Vegas because they have like extreme amounts of traffic. And so they basically have somebody who is there and they're watching the video of the traffic and they're basically making the choice of like, hey, nothing's going on here. Let's transfer this green time over to this intersection to help clear that out. So they have systems that allow them to do that. So what we just did to the intersection, I think allows that functionality to tie into the greater system, but we're not in an area that experiences the kind of traffic that we would be included in a program like that.
Right, but we're not talking about traffic flow here. We're talking about pedestrian safety. It's a different, I understand that it impacts traffic flow,
Yes.
but uh, that's
So-
not the problem we're trying to solve for. We're trying to just get people across the street safely.
I understand, but when it comes to a PennDOT intersection and you have a permitting plan with PennDOT, if you do anything that is going to impact the flow of traffic in a negative way beyond a certain threshold, they don't let you do it. So you would have to show that it's not. And that's why it's something that, you know, would cost additional money to demonstrate that, to show them that it wouldn't. But I can certainly touch base with Derek and ask him about this premise and if this is something that he's seen. And if it is, then maybe we can look into applying to one of the safety grants that are available to deploy something like this.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like this. We got a lot done and it's great. It's much better than it was before. You know, it's not 100%. And
Yeah.
to the extent that we can continue to pursue it to get it to where we want it to be
Yeah.
without incurring any significant costs, I think it just makes sense to do so. I mean, you know, like I've said before, it would just really be a terrible thing if somebody actually got hit there. And, you know, there's still an area where it seems possible for that to happen.
Yeah. And
Pretty, you know, more
part of the
possible than I'm
issue-
comfortable with.
yeah. And, you know, part of the issue is the wonky alignment of the intersection that causes issues, which
Right.
is not a lot that we can get around. So, hear you. We'll talk to Derek, see what he says about that. And then if that is something that he thinks could eventually be approved by PennDOT, then we will start that process of figuring out how to fund it and go back and do that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, next project is Mary Yardley Bridge. So as stated in my report, we had a meeting with DCNR on Tuesday. Matt and Paula joined me for that meeting, and there was like 5 people from DCNR, so there was a party, but it was a very fruitful meeting. Through this, we learned that DCNR's elevation project is actually moving forward. They are hoping to start construction imminently. They're just kind of waiting for updated costs and making sure all of their permits are good. But what they told us was that with that project, they're going to be raising the towpath up to a 39 elevation. And so that kind of changes what we had previously designed in our grading plan and had submitted to them. And so while we were out there with them, it became apparent that they were not going to be super strict about us staying within the easement when it came to the grading, that everybody was far more concerned with making sure that we were going to be creating a project that increased the utility of that area and restored the proper alignment of the towpath, which right now goes around that mound and is technically outside of DCNR property. It's actually within the utility easement for those poles right there. So when we acknowledge that DCNR doesn't have an issue with us grading outside of the easement, we just can't put any permanent structures outside of our current easement, it became apparent that everybody was more interested in realigning the towpath, which now means that part of our project includes rehabbing the towpath, which opens up an avenue of funding through DCNR. So we are going to be working with them to figure out what cost saving and cost sharing opportunities there are, which should help bring down the cost of the project. So they're supposed to be sending me plans of the elevation project that I can provide to our design team to tie into it. And then we're going to be sending them another grading plan to continue moving forward with that. And we may potentially kind of bifurcate the grading portion of the project away from the installation of the bridge so that we can have their side crew potentially do that aspect of it and get some cost savings, since they are already going to be out there doing that and they're going to have materials and such. So we're going to figure out what we can. If their project gets pushed again and they can't go out into the spring, we might be able to do them congruently, which would be wonderful. But we're still seeing. So the whole schedule of the project has kind of flipped a bit, which is why there was not one provided with this latest report, but there will be one provided with the next report that should reflect these changes and what's going on with DCNR. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you for that. And that's encouraging. And it leads you to the question, of course, I want to have my cake and eat it, but is there any, does that open up the possibility to grade it in such a way that we can have less or even eliminate the steps on the bridge?
We are 100% attempting to do that.
Awesome.
There will still be steps on the other side because we're not touching the grading at this point in time, but it is every intention to remove the steps on the Fold Avenue side.
Great news. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I was muted. Before we continue, I see Ms. Taylor had her hand up.
Yes. In our fundraising efforts, one potential donor asked to see a rendering of the bridge.
Yeah.
Is it possible at this time to produce that?
Yeah, actually, I spoke earlier with the design team today and requested that they reach out to Gator to receive that rendering. So he told me that they had sent one a while ago, but that it was poor quality and not something he thought was worth showing the public. So he is working on requesting another one. And as soon as I have that, I will send it along to the Mary Yardley Bridge Committee.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on Mary Yardley Bridge? All right, seeing none, let's keep moving.
David, I'll just say fundraising efforts are going. Sorry, fundraising efforts are going on. I just made my donation. I think it would be great if members of council and our elected officials donate to the project, especially we're getting out there and asking the community. I think that would be a fantastic show of leadership into the community. So urge all my fellow council members and the mayor to donate. That would be a great thing.
Sounds good. I know you're not going to let us get away with not doing it, so we'll send something your way. All right.
Okay, and then we've got the Pico property. I spoke with Paul at Public Works. We are still waiting to get the final word back from Pico, but they did inform us that they did get their own appraisal back and they are reviewing it internally before they schedule another discussion with the borough. So hopefully we hear soon. And then the last one would be North Main Street sidewalk. So there was some additional survey work that needed to occur to make sure that the tie-ins to the existing driveways are properly graded. So the survey crew will be out there tomorrow grabbing that additional information. Paul was wonderful and helped get permission from the residents ahead of time to cut down on the amount of time our survey crew will need to be out there. The only resident we did not make contact with was 108 North Main Street. So the survey crew is instructed to knock on their door and hopefully somebody's there. If not, we will not intrude on their property and we will make do with publicly available information. But yep, once the survey work is done, we will move forward with creating a conceptual plan that we are going to be submitting with the grant application at the end of the month. And then when that conceptual plan is ready, we're going to send it out to the residents so that they can get a first look at what the alignment will be so that we can ensure that phase 2 has more transparency than phase 1. And then that concludes my report unless anybody has any questions.
All right, seeing no questions there, I think we can move on. All right, thank you. Next is over to Manager Johnson for your report.
Okay, besides my regular updates I already submitted to you earlier, I have before you 2 ordinances, or ordinance number 485 and 486 for the police and non-uniform pension plans. This is a routine confirmation of the pension plans that is done every 6 to 10 years by all municipalities that PMRS manage their pension plans. There's no major change to the plans. And also keep in mind that these plans, because we are a small municipality with small staff and small police department, are state funded. So I would need council to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 485 and 486 for the pension plans.
All right, let's take these one at a time. So is there a motion on ordinance 485?
I'll motion for ordinance 485.
Sensen.
All right, so a motion was made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Ms. Siegel Morris. I'm sorry, are we advertising here?
We did. We advertised them
This is
already.
adoption, right. Right. This is adoption of ordinance 485 in regards to.
And that is the non-uniform.
All right, is there any discussion or questions from council?
Yeah, David, it's Matt. I guess, so Paul, I did read the material that you sent ahead of time. It was helpful. I think is painfully obvious. It's my first council meeting, so I'm not as up to speed on the history of this. I appreciate your explanation that this is pretty routine and something that comes up. And I do understand how the pension plans work in terms of their administration by the state and funding by the state. Could you just give me just maybe 20 seconds or whatever long it takes of what exactly we're approving and what effect this has? And I'm not exactly familiar with, while I get that this is routine, I don't understand what purpose it's serving.
I believe PMRS just wants everybody to relook at their pension plans so that they're doing everything that we want them to do. And that's really about it. It's just a review of them, a quick look at them. Nothing changed on either plan. So it's just redoing them, just re-accepting them.
It's reasserting their authority or their role in administering the plans, I guess, along the same framework that they have been up to this point. Okay.
Yes. And we switched to PMRS, Matt, probably about 11 years ago, and the plans have done wonderful for the future of those that are going to be participating. So it was a good move many, many years ago when we went to PMRS.
Do we have any other questions for members of council on the ordinance? I've seen none from the public. Dr. Perlmutter, I will unmute you for comment.
Thanks. I requested a copy of the ordinance after it was advertised in the newspaper. And Manager Johnson sent me a one-page document that the entire thing refers to the contract. So without the contract, it's pretty difficult to understand what you're voting on. In fact, Section 3 says the borough acknowledges that by passage and adoption of this ordinance, the borough officially accepts the contract and the financial obligations resulting from the administration of the contract. And as much as you're saying it's routine, there has been issues with transparency with the borough. In fact, I'm not even sure who this represents. I mean, what members of the borough are participating in this ordinance other than the police? How many other people are participating in this pension? And I don't understand why you would vote on something without letting the public see the contract. The whole thing is the contract.
The contract was done many years ago, like I said, 10, 11 years ago when we officially went with PMRS. The only person that's on the non-uniform pension plan is myself, as I'm the only full-time employee.
Okay, so to follow up, since it's a pension and I don't have the contract, I kind of would like to clarify. Usually with pensions, a person will receive the last highest 3 years of their salary. Since you served as a borough secretary for most of your time at the borough, and now you're serving as the manager, since I don't have the contract, I have no idea if the town, if that represents the salary you're getting now or the salary you got then. In fact, I don't even know what anybody's salary is because you never break down the budget and let us know. And I think at this time, since, you know, I don't know if it's so routine and you already have it, why are you not releasing it? And why are you voting on it again? I mean, it just seems like it's a transparency issue.
Dr. Perlmutter, I'm going to make a blanket statement here. You know, this is a bit of a routine critique that we receive in regards to transparency. And what I will say is this, is that it is simply impossible for even a small municipality, you know, not to mention what a large one would have to go through, to anticipate every piece of information that someone may want to see and then proactively release that, right? There would be thousands upon thousands of records if we did it that way. And that is why we have the right to know law in Pennsylvania. Residents can request these documents. Now there's a system and there's a timeline to doing that because the borough has at times in the past, and I know will again, become inundated with these requests. This ordinance was advertised for a sufficient amount of time that would allow someone to make a request for relevant information or whatever questions they may have about it. You know, that is how the system works. That is how government works. That is how we are transparent. And to put it bluntly, if someone does not avail themselves of those opportunities to access the information they want to see, there's not much we can do about that. As I said, it would be practically an impossible feat to try to just disclose literally everything. You would lose it all in a sea of information.
But I did request it and it wasn't given to me. Okay. Let's
So
get off the
I'm not
transparency.
finished and I did not acknowledge you to speak yet. You know, we have gone many rounds at this. The borough complies with right to know requests in a timely fashion. Full
This is
stop.
an ordinance. It's not a right to know request. You're passing an ordinance. Has every member of council that's about to vote on this read this contract? Because if they haven't read the contract, you should suspend this vote until everybody, you should not be allowed to vote if you haven't read the contract. This is an ordinance. It's not a right to know request. It was published in the newspaper that it would be made available and it wasn't made available. So you're mixing oranges and apples. It's not the same thing.
We're not voting on the contract. That's already established. We're voting on the ordinance. So there is a difference. You may not see the difference or you want the information, but obviously you bring up a point, we'll consider it. And, you know, we appreciate your viewpoint here, but we're voting on this ordinance right here.
Thank you. Is there any other comment from the public in regards to ordinance number 485?
David, can I ask Paula a clarifying question, either at now or after you're done with public comment?
You know, go ahead now.
Okay. Paula, can you just, I think this may bridge some of this gap, and can you just explain briefly how the funding for the pension works for the various pensions?
It's totally state funded. The police pension is obviously the larger of the two. We get state funds. We should be getting them any day now from the state. That goes directly into the police pension. Any leftover goes into the non-uniform. It's very little amount that doesn't cover the non-uniform. I want to say maybe a couple $100, if that. But it's because we're so small, we're very lucky compared to some other municipalities that taxpayer money actually has to get put into it, where this is totally state funded.
Right. That's my understanding. And so I think Dr. Perlmutter, just to address you, just in the spirit of what's going on here, because we're a small borough, the state funds the pension for our full-time employees within reason. Okay. We decide how those pensions are administered. And we decided as a council several years before any of us were here that we were going to contract that to this company. We're happy with how they have performed under that contract, and we're passing an ordinance to continue that. There's no funding involved here, and how much someone makes really doesn't affect at all the borough in terms of the borough's contribution to that pension. The pension is funded by the state. So I'm concerned about, I'm just wondering, what the specific concern is in terms of the overall arrangement. But from my perspective, we have a system that's working, and now that I understand exactly what the ordinance is, I'm certainly comfortable with keeping, this arrangement with this company because it's served the borough well from as far as I can tell as the contract's been in place.
I think to add, thank you, Mr. Curtin. I think to add to that, the general sense here is when something hasn't changed and it's a routine to continue to do it, and there haven't been any problems with it and haven't been any concerns raised, there are bigger fish to fry than that.
Understood. Thank you. We have any final?
Sorry. Although I don't want to get you the wrong impression, because I do think that the question is a reasonable question. So just to say that, but it's just we don't really have a problem, but the question is a reasonable question.
Right. Thank you. All right. Were there any other comments from the public in regards to Ordinance 485? All right. Hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of adoption of Ordinance 485 for the non-uniform pension, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0.
And then the second one is Ordinance 486, and that is for the police pension plan.
So do we hear a motion for the adoption of Ordinance 486 for our police pension?
I'll motion to adopt Ordinance 486.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Mr. Ross. Do we have any questions or comments from council? Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries 6-0.
Thank you. And the second item I have for you is Resolution 2008. This resolution is to waive the required officer contributions into their pension plan because of, like I said before, being a small town and our smaller police force, our pension plan is totally state funded. Therefore, our officers are not required to contribute to their plan. So this would need another motion to approve as well.
Do we hear a motion?
I'll motion to adopt that resolution.
Second.
All right, motion was made by Ms. Siebel Morris, seconded by Mr. Ross, to pass Resolution 20-08, the waiver of officer contributions. Are there any comments or questions from council? Mr. Curtin.
Yeah, Paula, again, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Just to potentially get ahead of some questions. This is in keeping with how we have behaved historically in this regard. This is not a change, and similar to the ordinances, which is maintaining the status quo, this maintains the status quo arrangement, and we're just ratifying that as we have to do periodically. Is that correct?
That is correct, sir. This is done yearly, this resolution.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions or comments from council? there any questions or comments from the public? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0.
And my next item, every year we go out to bid with the consortium for our road salt for the winter. So this is for the year, where are we? 2020, 2021 for our road salt. Bids were received and Morton Salt was the lowest bidder again this year. Their bid was $47.75 per ton delivered and $47 per ton undelivered. So every year we have to make a motion to accept this bid so that when we go buy our road salt, it's at a much cheaper price. So
I'll
there's
make
two.
the motion
There you go.
to approve the bid by Morton Salt for our road salt program for year 2021.
Second.
All right, the motion was made by Mr. Ross and seconded by Mr. McCann to accept the bid from Morton Salt for the cost of $47.75 per ton delivered and $47 even per ton undelivered. Is there any questions or comments from council? Questions or comments from the public? Hearing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion carries 6-0.
And my next item, the 2020 elevation grant. It's time to apply for that by the end of this month. And as you know, we're waiting to hear on the 2019 elevation grant. I'm hearing good things that we could actually be successful with that. For the 2020 grant, we're looking for 6 homes to be elevated, and the cost to submit for this grant would be approximately $7,200. And much of which, if we do get this grant, we would receive reimbursement for these expenditures. There is a $500 application fee from the residents to help offset some of these costs. So I just need to know if council is still interested in going after these grants. So this one, like I said, is the 2020 grant that needs to be submitted by the end of this month.
Do we hear a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
All right, the motion was made by Mr. McCann, seconded by Mr. Ross to submit application for 2020 home elevation grants. Are there any questions or concerns from council?
Yeah, I'll just say, I know this would be well appreciated by the members of the community down there in the floodplain. I know a lot of people have been asking. They've shown up at meetings. I think this is an important step for the borough.
David.
Yep, Mr. Curtin.
Paula, this is just in the spirit of the conversations we've had over the last week as I'm getting more and more familiar with the budget. Something like this, where we front it and it comes back, does this come out of the general account, or where would something like this, this is more just curious than anything else, how do we handle an expense like this and then the reimbursement?
We do have an account that's set up for our elevations, and there is some monies that are in there left over from other grants that we collected the application fee. So it'll be paid through that fund. So it won't even be our general fund. It'll be out of our elevation accounts.
And are the grants awarded on a property by property basis, and then we're effectively a flow through, and that the grants awarded to us for, make it up, property X, and then we receive the money and then administer it out to property X, or how does it work in just the flows?
When the application is done, each house gets looked at and an amount gets attached to each house, how much it should cost. The money does flow through the borough, so we are the general contractors, you can call us. So it will go out to bid for each individual house, and then we pay the contractor from there. So it will flow through us, and we usually get money upfront to do this. We've been successful doing it that way, and it makes it much easier on the borough and everybody else.
Well, and to John's point, if we don't do this, those people aren't able to apply for the funds, right? So it's important for us to take this step to enable people to get
Absolutely.
access to the grant. Okay.
Yeah, they can elevate their homes on their own, but with these grants, most of them are 90-10. So FEMA's paying 90%, and sometimes they pay 10%. And then there is also grants out there that are 100%. So it really depends on how much flooding each individual property has had on which grant they get.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mhm.
Right. Any other questions or comments from council members? All right, with that, we'll move to the public. Dr. Perlmutter, I will unmute you. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm one of those people that was part of the flood. It's actually a very large part of our town. I brought this up during the interview for the vacant council seat. I think it's great. I think you absolutely should apply for FEMA monies. My concern was that there was a large amount of money that was going to consultants, in that, you know, a tremendous amount was going to through the borough and being paid to consultants for each house. I just think it's a great thing to apply, but I don't know, when you say 6 houses, is there a number attached to it? I mean, is there an amount of money when you're applying? Or, because I would think when you apply for something, you have to put an amount of money on it.
Well, that's some of the cost, Ms. Perlmutter. Of that $7,200 is determining how much each house is going to cost. Therefore, the engineer does have to get involved.
I'm talking about the other consultants that have been involved. But again, I think it's a great thing. I just think we need to get all the extra people getting paid out of the equation. And I think that a lot more houses could probably be raised.
Thank you for your comment. Any other members of the public have comment on the home elevation applications? Right. Hearing and seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Right, that motion carries 6-0.
And my next item is the AC unit in upstairs council chambers. Also, you won't be aware, but it did die in July. We do have, I think Planning Commission's the only one that's really meeting right now. It is a 20-year-old unit. It's going to cost approximately $7,700 to replace the entire unit. I'm asking if council wishes to move forward with this now, or is it something that you would like to put off and wait into the new year, and then we can put it into the next year's budget? But that's something that you would have to decide.
Will we receive other estimates for replacing that, or just this one that you included in the packet?
I could check with other people. The person that I did get this one from is the one that we use all the time for the borough. And he does work throughout the borough. He's a Lower Makefield business, but I could check around for other prices as well.
I was just wondering.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be good just for measure, because of the
Sure.
size of the expense, to just get a few bids. And then
Okay.
we can decide, not to say that we wouldn't necessarily go with one that we thought was better, but just to make sure we're, you know, that they're all somewhat similar.
Okay. Great point.
Right, and just for clarification here, we're below the bid threshold on this, but I think, you know, of course, it makes sense to make sure that we're shopping around.
Absolutely.
And Matt, you're muted there. I see you talking.
Thank you. I was about to ask you, David, what is the bid threshold? Because I didn't know that. So thank you for anticipating that.
It's 21,000.
Okay. thank you for that. And I guess in terms of doing this before the budget or pushing it to next year, my view is something like this, just for anyone's benefit, is this to me feels like something we got to do, right? We this doesn't feel like something we could put off, forever. We have a lot of members of the community who, we want to encourage to participate once we're back, able to get together in person. And I think providing an environment that's, suitable for that is important. So in my mind, at this type of cost in and around what you're talking about, and for the nature of what we need to do, which to me is sort of ongoing capital necessary upkeep, I'm comfortable, bidding on or voting on this as soon as we have, enough bids to make sure we feel good about it.
Okay.
All right, so I think seems like there's probably consensus on that. Then maybe we, get some other price options, and we can maybe roll this onto the agenda for next time.
Sure.
Do you have any other member of council want to chime in on that or object to that?
It's good for pasta. I mean, it's not a bad quote, but you probably could get a little cheaper, but then it's going to get a discussion about the quality of the work and, things like that. So I have replaced one of those, so it was right in line with that. So.
And some of them have like lifetime warranties, so it'd be interesting to, 20 years is a pretty good lifespan that we got out of the last one. But that would be what I would be looking at, not just the cost, but, what kind of unit it is and how much we'd be on the hook for in the future to maintain it.
I will add that we do have a maintenance contract with this company. It's Sweeney Cruisin Oil. Anytime something happens, they are out within a half hour, especially in the police department, if their air conditioning goes out or heating problems and they get a little chilly back there. They do come out. They're very good to us, but I will get other quotes as well and bring them back.
Is this the same system that serves, how we've opened Borough Hall in the past for emergency purposes?
No, this is just council chambers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think we have consensus there, so we will revisit this next meeting, with a few different price options, and we can consider a decision at that time.
Okay. And my last item, save the best for last.
Sorry, Paula, hold on. Somebody raised their hand. Number ending 4150. Go ahead. If you had comment, please state your name for the record too.
Yes, good evening. This is Peter Guardani, 44 South Bell, Yardley Pad. Just a quick question on the air conditioning, because I understand that there was thought and discussion about doing some major construction on the second floor of chambers that may increase the area, volume, and size of that space. Would we consider, if we're doing air conditioning and heating, to calculate the extra needs into the new unit if we were to decide to do capital improvements like that? That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Point worth considering. I'll just say the idea of the large Borough Hall renovation is, I don't want to call it pie in the sky, but it'd be a very long-term grant application process that I would say is probably more on the 5 to 10 year range of plans versus the 1 to 5 year range of plans. But it is a good point and worth considering. Thank you. All right. So
Okay. And my last item, save the best for last. As you are aware, I presented you with the 2021 first draft of our budget. We are keeping the same format as we created from last year. We believe it's much more transparent and it's just easy to follow. At a quick glance, the 2020 budget, without diving into the numbers, will most likely indicate a budget deficit of $50,000 to $70,000 this year from the general fund, mostly due to the pandemic. We have deferred expenses that were budgeted in 2020 to 2021. Some of those are the roof on the annex, doors on Borough Hall, additional maintenance and upkeep of Borough Hall, Mary Yardley Bridge, North Main Street sidewalks, and a police car. Some income that's being adversely affected in our current budget is as follows, and we discussed real estate transfer tax, fines, violations, special police services, protective inspection fees, which is your building permits, contributions from private sectors. Therefore, because of some of this that happened, we are recommending a tax increase for 2021. Yardley residents have not had a tax increase since 2017. Based on this budget, we're recommending a 4 mil increase for 2021. We would like to allocate 2 mils to our general fund, which handles our day-to-day operations, including purchasing of a new police car, taking care of any of the roof on the annex, any of the upgrades to Borough Hall. And then we also recommend allocating 2 mils to our capital reserve. And by doing this, we would save for the future of Yardley Borough, such as your sidewalks and any big projects that come along. Our current tax levy is, where are we? It is, Patty, do you remember? It's 24.73. And what we would like to implement is 28.73. 1 mil is approximately $35,004 each mil. I'm not going to go through the individual tax. The only one that would change is a general purpose, which is our general fund, and that would go up to 22.66 mils, and then capital reserve would be 2 mils. Let's see what this would look like to our residents. In 2020, the average assessment in Yardley Borough is for an assessment of $26,800 times our millage. Our borough tax is about $662.76. With the proposed tax increase, with our increased millage of $28.73, the roundabout tax bill would be $769.96. So that would be an approximate of $107 increase for 2021. This would put $53.60 per household into our general fund and $53.60 per household into our capital reserve. Most of the projects and upgrades that were planned for 2020 have been delayed into the 2021 budget. We received a grant of $40,000, as you're aware, for the replacement of Mary Yardley Bridge. There's community fundraising that's helping. So pretty much all of our big projects were trying to get some funding done and some expenditures done, but a lot has rolled into 2021. We really need to do some upgrades to Borough Hall, for example. We need new doors. We got quotes for 2 new doors at the cost of about $4,000 each, because of the doors are custom made and they're all the old doors. One being our front door and the other one being the one in council chambers that has all the insulation falling out. So it's something that we really need to do. We wanted to do this year, but we're obviously putting it off till next year. No, some of you might remember the police roof a couple years back that needed to be redone. Quotes that we were getting just to replace the police roof were between $134,000 to $177,000. There was no way the borough could have afforded this a few years ago. 'Tis why we need to start putting some money into the capital reserve, because eventually, if we don't go for an expansion, that's, like David said, would be many years down the road. We're gonna have to eventually replace that roof. And if we don't start saving some money, we're gonna be in the same situation that we were. Acquiring the Pico lot on Morgan Avenue would be increasing our open space and benefiting our CRS program. We did receive the note where we could help, that would help us purchase the Pico grant, but we need to, this is something that's pretty important, like I said, for the CRS, to minimize the construction in the floodplain. in closing, the budget will enable us to deliver some top community initiatives while doing the improvements that need to be done and keeping up the services that are expected by our residents. But as I said, the budget is just a draft, and I welcome all of your comments. Anybody that wants to come into Borough Hall, sit with Patty and I, go over it line by line so you can see our thought process. And I look forward to your comments as well.
So Paula, first I want to start by saying thank you, and thank you to Patty as well. I know that a lot of work goes into these budgets, especially over the last few years. We've really changed the format and tried to make this a document that makes more sense to someone who might look at it and say, what is the borough spending money on? So I want to say thank you for all the effort that went into it. And it is certainly not fun to be the one that has to come to council and say, I think we need more money. Certainly, despite what you might hear around election time, nobody says, yippee, hooray, I want to raise taxes, and I'm looking forward to doing that, right? That is just not the case. But as with all things, costs go up every year. And in particular, as it relates to our capital reserve fund, I know that when I started on council following the 2017 election, we essentially didn't have one of those. And these large capital expenditures we were trying to shove them into line items on our annual budget, and that's just not a sustainable way forward. And over the past few years, we've been able to start making some contributions out of the general fund into a capital reserve fund. But I really, I applaud the idea of saying, let's dedicate some money to this capital reserve fund every year. That's something that households that budget well do. It's definitely something that companies that budget well do. And I think it makes sense for a municipality to take the same approach, right? We know that there are going to be large expenditures coming, and we need to plan for that so that we don't have an oh shoot moment when something big goes and we need that money. So again, thank you for all that went in. And at this point, we will open it up to discussion from council. Again, this is a draft budget. There are plenty of times for changes.
A couple of things I'd like to share, if I may. In my first term on council, I was chair of general government, and I learned a few things. That's when there was a lot of discussion about taxes, because what had happened there is there had not been a tax increase in 10 years. And that sounds great. But that's not a good thing when your borough is structured the way that, when your system is structured the way ours is structured. And I just, for the benefit of the public, I just want to, and for council too, I just want to provide some perspective on that. Our millage is based on the assessments, and the assessments never change. And so unlike in some parts of the country, like people who live in Florida, every year they have a new assessment. And so they have the same millage, but their cost that they have to pay in taxes goes up every year to reflect the cost of inflation. Now, inflation is like 2 to 3% a year on average. But that includes things like a loaf of bread or a can of soup, the kind of things that cost money to the borough that go up higher than that rate of inflation are things like insurance, health insurance, police cars, roofing for Borough Hall. Those things go up much more than that. And so I'm a huge fan of line by line scrutinizing the budget, and I have done that, and many of you know that. I think that the borough manager and general government, from what I've seen, are doing a stellar job in managing that. But you get to a point of diminishing returns. A person cannot live on the same salary for 10 years, the same exact number, and not have increase in housing, an increase in food, an increase in medical expenses. And so my point is that there's no other way a sound person, no matter what your philosophy is on taxes can conclude that you can have a borough like this without having regular tax increases. And so I am happy to see the request for a tax increase. I think it's important to look through and, for us all to dig and do our due diligence, and to also encourage us to understand that regular tax increases that reflect the cost of the increased costs of our main expenditures due to inflation are very important for our financial well-being, and not waiting 10 years like what happened when I was on council, because what happens is you lose all those years of small incremental increases. And so by the time you do it, you're in the hole, and you've kicked so many things down the road that now, even if you do the increase you need to, you're stuck in this situation where the increase is too big and you can't afford to do anything. So I think it's the right thing to do. And I hope that adds some perspective, because I've seen some conversation going around about taxes, which is reasonable because nobody wants to pay more taxes. Let's face it. We don't want to be up here suggesting it. And as a resident, nobody wants to pay it, but we have to be reasonable people.
I just wanted to chime in real quick. I agree with a lot of what Yuri said. I will say they can reassess the properties in Bucks County. It is something that comes up from time to time. Not likely, but certainly they could. Right now, I know we have an opportunity with the line of credit, up to $500,000. Money is cheap. Interest rates are really low. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. There are some people that are really struggling. I don't know, for me personally, I'd rather draw from the line of credit for these items. Money is cheap. I think this is the time that you actually draw money, not raise taxes. So I would lean towards using more of that line of credit that we had already voted on for these capital projects, and to replenish some of the funds, and then maybe look to it after we have a little more sure footing after the pandemic is over. We know we're on better financial ground, but that's the way, I'm kind of viewing it right now. But I appreciate Paula's hard work on this. I'm not against the idea of raising taxes. I think it's good, prudent from time to time to, get increased revenues, but I see the opportunity with money being cheap right now. That may be the option that certainly I would look towards. But
David, would you mind, maybe for the benefit of everybody, just the budget process? I don't want people to think we're voting on this next meeting, right? And I know Paul alluded to willingness to meet with people in transparency, but just since this is the first time this year, how it works, and so people understand the timeline of how this will play out.
Right, so a useful document that we should probably dig out for anyone interested. There is a budget calendar that will, outline the various steps that need to take place on the budget. But as we said, this is round one. So we probably won't vote on a final budget until what, Paul, you think November, early December?
Usually December.
Yeah, we try not to leave it until a situation where if we don't pass it, we need to, come back over Christmas to figure it out. But we do have to get something passed by the new year. So that the final timeline on this really is probably that first meeting in December, which is when we would pass that ordinance regarding both, the tax levy and the budget. That being said, there's a lot of time between now and then to review this and look at this and say, does the amount that we're talking about for an increase, does that make sense? Do the expenditures that we're planning for make sense? So it's mid-September. We'll go a couple rounds on this. There'll definitely be another draft budget. But I think, the vote, probably if we're looking at, and actually, Bucky, correct me if I'm wrong, but did we change this? It's by resolution and not by ordinance anymore? Was that?
If you're not changing taxes, you can do it by resolution. If you are changing, then it has to be done by ordinance.
Okay. So with an ordinance, then I think what we could predict is probably, and obviously subject to change, but we would probably at that second meeting in November do a vote to advertise, which would give us the ability to adopt the new tax levy at that first meeting in December. So again, that could change, but my guess would be that would be our target timeline for final passage of this. Right, any other questions, comments, and so on there?
Nope, that's it.
All right, I see hand raised. Dr. Perlmutter, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Since there hasn't been much transparency when you borrowed the $500,000 line of credit, and even with a number of other things, I really think it's very important that everybody in town knows what you're proposing. Facebook seems to be one of the things, the Yardley Borough Facebook page. I know it's nice to post about book clubs and cookies and things, but it's really important, I think, that everybody in town be informed of this because it affects everyone. I also just would like to say, and not go on for a long time, I don't think it's necessary. I think this is the worst year of most people's lives. People who own businesses have lost money. It's a very, very hard time. And as much as I know you need to be comfortable in your office with a new door, a new roof, and new police cars, there's a lot of ways you could cut back. I mentioned that during my interview, that the amount of money that goes to the engineers, there's so many things that could be cut back. This is not the year to do this. People are hurting. And I really just want it to be advertised so that people know, so that I don't have to send out an email and tell people that you're proposing raising our taxes.
Yeah, Dr. Perlmutter, if I sound annoyed right now, it's because I am. And quite frankly, for you to say or imply that we borrowed $500,000 in the dark of night is bullshit. This was discussed, it was advertised, and the icing on the cake is that we didn't borrow any money, okay? This was the equivalent of opening a credit card. We didn't put any money on it. We would have to subsequently vote to do that. I'm sick and tired of, quite honestly, I'm sick and tired of the accusation that this council is somehow doing something corrupt when we are following all of the rules. And I know that you are here for every single one of those discussions, and just as one more thing, I can't let go as an aside to the comfort of our employees at Borough Hall. It is an absolute crime in this country that OSHA regulations don't extend to public sector employees. And I am not about to take advantage of that because we're going to save a little bit of money, right? It is ridiculous that there's like a 2-inch gap in the door that's upstairs at Borough Hall. I mean, those aren't acceptable working conditions. We can meet a basic baseline for our employees that are working in Borough Hall every day. And I'm sorry, I know I sound frustrated. It's because I am, and quite honestly, I'm tired of it. Do any other members?
You don't take criticism well, and you're not going to be.
Okay, I didn't acknowledge you. I'm muting you. We are moving on.
Pay taxes.
I am absolutely tired.
You do not pay taxes.
I do pay taxes, Dr. Perlmutter. I own a business. I pay $500 in taxes a year to Borough through that.
You don't pay property taxes. It doesn't affect you.
Thank you. Take me back to 1789, where you have to own land to vote in this country. Thank you very much. I see Mr. Crook raising your hand. I will unmute you. Go ahead and comment. Sorry, Mr. Crook, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Thank you. Yeah, just want to recap a couple of things. I got involved after the last proposed earned income tax proposal a couple of years ago. That was a far more draconian solution for what I'm not quite sure. Ultimately, when we did accept a property tax increase, it was fairly modest. While nobody likes tax increases, if you're going to increase my taxes, I prefer that it be done most locally where I have more control and more say. The fact that we can talk to you, we can discuss the budget with you, that to me at least puts more control on this side. I realize a lot of people are hurting, and yes, I'm sure we'll go through some more permutations of this to get where we want to go. But in general, I think maybe John was the one who said it before, or maybe it's Yuri. Is Yuri actually saying going 10 years without an increase is insanity? You know, we were really up against the wall at that point, and it had to be a little bit higher increase than we would have had to sustain. People need to get used to the idea that these costs will go up. You know, it's just going to happen. How much you do this year in a very difficult year is another matter. I have another second sort of question. This line of credit, I do remember discussions from a couple of years ago when we were doing this sort of citizens budget committee that I do recall, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I don't think you can actually maintain a loan across fiscal years. It's got to be paid off within the year. Is that false, or is it true? This line of credit can be carried over, can it be extended? Because I'm thinking about John's suggestion that we rely upon that, but if you can't rely upon that to last, you know, to continue the next fiscal year, then you're in trouble anyway with it.
This is, yeah, a Bucky question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I might be able to answer that. Yeah, there are two forms of essentially lines of credit. There are things called tax anticipation notes that a municipality, if they have a current year cash crunch, can borrow, until they get tax revenue, that sort of thing. Those have to be paid back in the same fiscal year. However, when you borrow for capital projects, which is what the borough did this year, that can extend, for as long as 20 or 30 years, however long the loan is for. So this is really a capital expenditure borrowing that'll be paid back over 5 years. It does not have to be paid back this year.
Okay, good to know. So it is a possible solution.
Yep.
Right. That's all. Thank you.
And Bucky, it's meant to be clear, we're not able to draw the line of credit to fund general operating expenses. As I read the note, the requirements of the note are that we have to use these things for capital improvement, for a lot of reasons, but that's one of them is the law of how that needs to work in terms of the use of proceeds.
Correct, and that requirement derives from both the state local government unit debt act and the federal tax code, where you can only borrow on a tax exempt basis for capital expenditures, by and large.
I was wondering if, I'm not sure it was stated what the requested increase here is. And of course, this is subject to change and all of us discussion review, but currently what that amounts to for the average assessment in the borough would be $107 a year. So like $9 a month or so for the average assessment. So I just wanted to make sure that people are clear on that. So although I agree about the issue of this being a pandemic year, that's unfortunate. At the same time, this is, I don't want to, for some people, it's more money than for others. And we have to be sensitive to that, but it's not an astronomical amount either. It's, at least at first glance, doesn't seem outrageous.
Thank you. Again, this is a draft budget, so if there are any other comments, let's have them now. Otherwise, there's going to be ample opportunity to review and discuss this document before we get to a place where we're voting on it. All right. Hearing and seeing none. Ms. Johnson, we were a long report from you tonight. Is that the end?
Yes, that is the end. Thank God.
All right, wrapping up
Thank
there.
you.
Turn it over to Mr. Klosser for solicitor's report.
Yes, well, the only item I was going to report on was the line of credit with the First National Bank of Newtown. We did successfully close it on September the 4th, so it is in place and it is available to the borough for the purposes that are set forth, in the borrowing ordinance for those capital projects that were listed. So that's now in place. The bank was wonderful to work with, as they were in the past with the borough. So that's basically done. So that's really all I had for my report tonight.
All right, thank you. Moving on, Mayor Harding, for your report.
Thanks, Council President. Just real quick, I wanted to take a moment and thank and acknowledge Chief Kelly for his annual awards ceremony tonight. It is a perfect tradition that he has brought to this borough and this department. It does absolutely recognize the efforts of our officers, which need recognition. And as Ori said, there are people that are alive in the borough today that may not have been alive without the actions of some of our officers. So I know Chief didn't get an award tonight, but he should get recognition for bringing it to the borough. It's a good tradition. I'm proud to be a part of it, and I look forward to doing it in future years. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Harding. All right, moving on, we'll go through one by one for council member reports. Let's start with, we still got vacant on the agenda. We'll have to update that for next time. Let's start with Mr. Ross.
Public Works met earlier. We pretty much covered everything in the engineers report. So nothing really new to report.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel-Morris.
The Human Relations Commission met on September 3rd with a new member, Chris Campolone, and current member, Julie Bueller. And so I believe that Chris is going to be reaching out to the Newtowns HRC to get some guidance on putting a permanent process in place and updating the HRC portion of our website. Regarding public safety, as you all heard, we had the award ceremony tonight. That was really nice, and I was very lucky to be included in that and got to speak. So I'm very happy to live in a community that has such a fine police force and great police leadership. And that is it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Siegel-Morris. From myself, I have no report this evening. However, I will just make note that, now that we are back up to full capacity on council, next meeting, I will set the goal to, by next meeting, discuss our council committees memberships with everyone. I want to make sure that Mr. Curtin is integrated into that process. And we're not just filling the vacancies that were left by Ryan, but that we're doing this in a way that makes sense. So I will probably connect with each of you just to see how we may want to shift things around, if at all, and have that to report back on next time. Ms. Thompson is not with us tonight. She's on vacation, lucky her. So Mr. McCann, you are next.
I'll just reiterate and go to fodc.org to donate to the Mary Yardley Bridge Project. Also, I want to welcome Matt. Great addition. He's asked some great questions. So welcome aboard and thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Feiner?
Nothing to report on this end. Thank you.
All right. And then Mr. Curtin, if you have anything, I know it's round one here, but you do get the
I'll be super quick. Appreciate everybody, that I've been able to spend time with, and I hope to get around to everybody else in the next 2 weeks. I guess general government met with Kim, Carolyn, and I met with Paula and Patty last Thursday to go through the first proposal of the budget and understand their thinking and some of the rationale for their initial proposals, and really to educate us on some of the line items and to get familiar with how the fund flows and the accounts work. So that was helpful ahead of that submission to us, which I think was on Friday. And I certainly plan to spend a little more time with Paula and Patty to go through it in even more detail. It is the type of thing, and I'll encourage people from the public who want to spend time digging into the budget, which I think is a great thing and that we should all do. It's not the easiest thing to just go through the Excel sheet, or even the borough manager's, budget summary or budget proposal. If you have even 20 minutes of explanation that you can see how the numbers tie and how, some money comes in as a grant and shows up as revenue and then goes out as an expense, but it's really just a flow through item. Once some of those things were kind of cleared up for me, the whole thing really started to make sense. So I would encourage people that if you are going to dig in, avail yourself of the opportunity to sit down with Paula and Patty, and they can probably really help clean up a lot of other time that you would spend trying to figure some of those things out on your own. And then lastly, I want to thank Mayor Harding, Chief Kelly, and Paula for arranging my swearing in ceremony. Yesterday it was great, and I really appreciate Chris, you including my kids. They really enjoyed being a part of that, and it was a good day for us. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Curtin, and welcome. I hope you're having fun.
Yep.
We all are. All right, that concludes council member reports. I don't think we'll have anything come up, but just for formality, we'll go through it. Next on our agenda is discussion items. This would be the opportunity for any council members, with sort of long-term business, if they want to raise something for initial input from council, now would be the time to do so.
Yeah, David, I just wanted to chime in with, I had a discussion with a neighbor over on North Main. They brought a really good point up about, there is a four-way intersection where Dolington and North Main meet, about trying to push for a stop sign there even, because a lot of people speed right off into 95. There's a lot of traffic congestion in the morning. It's difficult to turn. So it was an interesting and cheap solution. Obviously, it's a PennDOT road and Lower Makefield would be involved. But I thought it was a good suggestion. And even the long-term, they brought up the long-term viability of the roundabout there to help traffic congestion. So I thought it was a good idea and maybe something we can maybe partner together with Lower Makefield.
All right, it's a good point. I was actually thinking that before you mentioned it, that I know that the idea of a roundabout at that intersection has come up in the past. I believe the first time it came up was while we were sort of debriefing the traffic study for North Main that was done by Perry Warren's office. The obvious complication we've touched on is that it would be a partner project with Lower Makefield Township, and specific to a roundabout too. I think it would take a small bite out of one of the properties on the corner there. But something to consider. I know that gets a little nuts up there at morning rush hour.
I've seen, I actually saw a bike get hit there. But I think the idea of having something there to slow down entry into the borough is a no-brainer. It's a much better solution to speeding through the borough than relying on enforcement. Enforcement should be kind of a last resort, not the primary. And in my previous, what I've heard previously with the roundabout is this idea that it wouldn't fit there. And frankly, that's ridiculous. If you go around the country, you see roundabouts in tiny little intersections. They're very, very common now because they kind of are the best of both worlds. They allow traffic, good flow of traffic, and increased safety and reduced collisions. It's not the same thing as a traffic circle, which is mostly just a PR thing. People think a roundabout is a traffic circle. Those are bad. Those are proven to be bad and not work. I'm sure, Liz, you could say more about this, but there has to be a way that we can fit a roundabout in there. If there are towns all over this country where there are roundabouts in tiny little intersections where large vehicles actually have to ride over part of them to get through. So I just don't accept that idea. It's not about can you put a roundabout, it's how do you get a roundabout in there? And that would be a great project for us to collaborate on, probably get, funding for through grants and look into doing that. I think it's a win for everybody. That's my piece.
Yeah, I don't want to belabor this at the very end of the meeting tonight, but this might be something that we could refer into Public Works as we sort of move forward with these other projects. As I said, I know that as a result of the initial traffic studies on North Main, this came up. And in those meetings, as I recall, PennDOT was pretty explicit that, basically they now like the idea of roundabouts and there's money available to put them in. And this does seem like a good location for it. Again, the early high-level view challenges are two municipalities and the question of whether or not we do need to take a bite out of that one corner lot. But I think we all are in agreement that the problem exists there. It's just what is the solution? So again, let's not belabor it tonight, but I think we should definitely start paying attention to this and say, is this something we can take action on? All right, any other discussion items tonight? All right, hearing none, we don't have anything under other business. So at this point, we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Oh, you know what? Sorry, everybody. Before we vote, I saw someone raise their hand at the very last second.
Oh, sorry. It's Vicky. I promise I'll be super quick.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I just wanted to mention they now have put on the schedule a cleanup for Lake Afton on October 17th from 8 a.m. to noon. So it's up on the Lake Afton Facebook page, but was hoping that we could mention it as part of the meeting minutes and really generate some awareness of that upcoming cleanup. They are noting that they want COVID protocols to be followed and to bring your own tools and wear masks. But I just think, all the progress that they've made, we really want to support our neighbors and the Friends of Lake Afton.
All right. Thank you. We can definitely promote that. We talk about this all the time, right? Lake Afton is sort of like the crown jewel of the town here. So let's, Paula, let's get that on our Facebook page. Let's push that out. That's a good community thing to do right now.
Will do.
With that, let's return to that motion to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks,
Good
Council.
night.